Hi, so this is for the final presentation discussion. One of the themes that impacted me most during this course was the emphasis on letting our patients take the lead in our conversations and encounters with them, as well as us practicing active listening during this time to show them that they are really being heard, and to allow us to hear their story and to get to know them as a person. And I feel that this theme was really emphasized in our first book, Making Healthcare Whole by Puchalski and Farrell. And I saw this was first really mentioned on page 40, and the authors said, in all matters related to spirituality and healthcare, the best course is always to follow the patient's lead. And I think this, as we talked about during this class, this refers to more than just talk regarding the spirituality of the patient, but in all of our encounters with them, talking about their diagnosis and their treatment, that we need to give them open-ended questions and allow time for them to express their concerns and their feelings and their questions to us so that we can better take care of all of their needs. And I think this is something that can often be difficult to do because healthcare providers are notoriously short on time. And with the advancement in technology in both medical diagnostics and in the techniques of physical exam, I think it can probably be tempting to just quickly give patients a scientifically proven diagnosis and a plan for treatment without really listening to the patient's story and their concerns and not making ourselves available to tend to their spiritual needs. I have to admit this is something I've struggled with in my past experience in healthcare. I was a patient care assistant and I was often, assigned 20 patients, and I had a checklist of things I had to do for all of them. And sometimes, patients really wanted to talk and express how they were feeling, and I really wanted to be compassionate, and I tried to be as best as I could. But in the back of my mind, I wasn't really listening. I was concentrating on everything else I had to do. And in my future career, I just want to remind myself and find ways to slow down and really listen to the stories of my patients and tend to their spiritual needs. Another theme that impacted me in this course was that spirituality does not necessarily equate to religion. And this theme was also emphasized in our first book, Making Healthcare Whole. And before this class, I have to admit, I kind of fell into the trap of just thinking of spirituality and religion as the same thing. And after delving into this book, I was reminded that each individual is spiritual, but spirituality refers to what gives them a deeper meaning and a purpose in their life, and something that brings them peace during the hard times and gives them strength to get through them. So for me, personally, my spirituality is rooted in my faith, but that's not the same for everyone. Puchalski included a good example, a story of one of her medical students interacting with a patient named Sandra. And the medical student interviewed Sandra and reported to Puchalski that she was not a spiritual person because she is an atheist. So Puchalski sent him back in there, and Chad, the medical student, discovered a more fuller definition of spirituality after talking with her, and found out that Sandra is indeed a highly spiritual person, but instead of being religious, she found her purpose in life by serving the homeless. And this is an important theme to consider, especially while working with patients that are facing serious illness, because illness brings an unforeseen turn in the road and a change in the story in the lives of patients. And so when you think about your plan for your life, illness is never a part of that plan. And illness causes one to ask themselves what their purpose in life is. And they really start to ponder the big questions of life. Why am I here? Why is this happening to me? What's going to happen now? What happens after this? And from my personal experience, I feel like I witnessed this with my grandmother. And her plan was to grow old and spend the rest of her life with my grandfather. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which of course was never part of either of their plans. And so this caused both of them to really contemplate the purpose in their lives and the big questions, why is this happening to them? And so she ended up taking care of him. But after his passing, my grandmother was able to find, grieved but was able to move on and find peace in her life. And she really found enjoyment in traveling and spending time with her family. And then, just as she thinks that she's back on plan, life throws wrenches, and she had to undergo big heart surgery for a calcified aorta and have that removed and a prosthetic aorta implanted. And a year after following up, they found lung cancer. So now she's undergoing chemo, and none of this is in her plan at any time. But even though she's not a particularly religious individual, she says what brings meaning to her life is her family, and being involved in her family and surrounded by them and supported by them is what brings her peace through the hard times. Now you're asked to find a theme that impacted us from our additional learning material. And I feel like I learned a lot about self-reflection from the short story Finding New Eyes by Rachel Riemann. And this was my favorite story from the whole course, which is why I picked it. And in this story, Josh, a cancer surgeon, after years and years working in healthcare, becomes cynical, depressed, and uncompassionate, and just hardened. And he started seeing a therapist, and she gave him an exercise that she wanted him to start reflecting on his day for 15 minutes every night and ask himself 3 questions. What surprised him that day? What moved him or touched him? And what really inspired him that day? And at first he thought it wasn't working, and he wasn't noticing anything. Nothing was changing. And after a while, he just started to notice small details about his patients or something that made him feel different. And this allowed him to really pay attention to his patients and get to know them and learn things from them. And he started to find meaning in his life again. And this, I really like this story because it's an interesting technique, and I had never really thought about it. I never really thought about the importance of self-reflection as a healthcare provider. And I'm really excited to try this technique once I really start my career in healthcare, because I know the days will be long, and I'm going to be working in healthcare for many years, and sometimes I'll get discouraged. And I want to remind myself to do self-reflection and reflect on what I've experienced that day. And I want to be able to find meaning in my work and hopefully prevent myself from getting burned out and keep my compassion going and my passion for working with patients and working in healthcare, so I can continue to care for my patients both physically and spiritually. So thank you for listening. I think we have all learned a lot through this class, and